What's going on, Digital Pigskin? Back with Fantasy Football Preview 2012, and we talked about halfbacks. Obviously, the next progression we would make in terms of your points makers going to be your quarterbacks. Now, the first three quarterbacks, in some people's minds, are really interchangeable. I'm going to go through why I put them this way, and then obviously I'd love to hear your guys' input on some of these, because I know there's some picks that are going to surprise people. Number one, I've got Aaron Rodgers. You know, the guy's consistent. He has a solid line, receivers that are willing to play for him, great timing and chemistry with those receivers, and you can tell by watching him play. He is in command of that offense, and that's critically important when you think about the quarterback position and what it means to a football team. You know, for those reasons, I've got to put Aaron Rodgers at number one. Number two, Tom Brady. Tom Brady has been proven to produce year in and year out, with or without weapons, and we've seen he is deadly if you get people in there that have chemistry. And I think we've seen that with Gronkowski. I think we saw that with Randy Moss. I think we've seen it with Wes Welker. And essentially, as long as Tom Brady wants to play football, I think you're going to see him standard in top 8, top 10, top 15 lists just because he's Tom Brady. Now, number three, I've got Drew Brees. And for the reasons that I put Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers above him, you have to look at the positives and then assess it, and then you have to look at the negatives. And there are some negatives with Drew Brees when it comes to the team. You know, the whole bounty gate, the whole coach suspension, those are things that are going to affect him, period. Now, they might not affect him the first game, the second game, the third game. It might not affect him until the third quarter of the 8th game, but it's going to affect him. And to me, talent will win out. He will have a good year. He will be productive. And the Saints will probably make the playoffs. I really believe that. But I can't not look at those negatives and put him above players that have a more complete team right now. So for that reason, I've got Drew Brees third. Fourth is going to be Eli Manning. You know, and Eli Manning has, in my opinion, as a Peyton Manning fan, stepped out of Peyton's shadow. He's went to Super Bowls. He's won Super Bowls. He's in a major market. That drama, that stress is over. And I think when you can have that pressure relieved from you, you can do what got you there in the first place, and that's play football. And that's not saying that Eli Manning doesn't make errant passes and have bad plays and do things that make you scratch your head. But I think those things have diminished in time. And I think he's playing better now than he ever has. And that's why I have to have Eli Manning as number 4. Fifth, I've got Matthew Stafford. You know, physically, Matthew Stafford has every ability to become a great quarterback in this league. The problem is his consistency. How much he relies on Calvin Johnson. And what happens to the Detroit ground game. If all those things fall into place, the Lions can be one of the best teams in the league considering the defense they put on the field. But I'm just not sold with the consistency. And I'm just not sold that they can win games on Matt Stafford alone if something were to happen to Calvin Johnson. Cam Newton is going to be my next pick. And, you know, Cam Newton has been one of the few players that has came out of the NFL and lived up to the hype. And you know what? Even if it was just for 1 year that we could see that kind of greatness and see that touchdown count, then it was worth it. But I think Cam Newton is a smart player. I think Cam Newton is a student of the game. And I think, although he won't do as well as he did last season, I think we're going to see great gameplay out of Cam Newton and more rejuvenation of Steve Smith's career. Now, one of the surprises I'm going to have, where most people may turn off the video, I've got Jay Cutler ranked up pretty high. And let me say why. Jay Cutler has a chip on his shoulder. So does his number 1 receiver, Brandon Marshall. These are players that in Denver put up a lot of points and looked very good. And then contracts, egos, certain things got in the way with both of them. They both wound up on different teams, more than once in some cases. But now they're back together, which has really been something they've both lobbied for when they went to their respective teams. I like the draft pick that they took with Alshon Jeffrey. I think he's a great compliment to Brandon Marshall. And when you look at how a quarterback is going to put up points, and you look at the weapons that Jay Cutler has, I think if you're just looking at yardage and touchdowns, I think he's going to surprise people this year. Next, I've got Matt Ryan. You know, Matt Ryan has a very, very complete team. He's got a great wide receiver, finally, that's stepped out of his shell in Roddy White. He's got a Hall of Fame player in Gonzalez, and he's got a very good running back in Michael Turner. And those three things give him one thing that every quarterback wants: confidence. Now, on a personal level, I really think Atlanta needs to win a playoff game. You know, they've got to stop doing this playoff fall-apart debauchery they've been up to. But if we're talking fantasy football, Matt Ryan would be a solid pick. To go on to the players I'm sold on. I'm sold on Phillip Rivers. Guy plays the game with a passion unmatched by a lot of players. It gets him in trouble at times, but he's always going to be steady for you, and he's always going to put up points. Next is going to be Ben Roethlisberger. You know, I'm not really a Steelers fan, but I watch enough of their games, and I watch my teams get beat by them enough times where when it comes down to clutch time, Ben Roethlisberger is one of the best ever. He really is. He finds a way to win games, sometimes unconventionally, but he finds a way to win, and that's very important in the NFL, not so much in fantasy football. And then finally, I've got RG3. I think with RG3, he has the talent around him. I definitely like Pierre Garçon. Definitely like what they've got on defense to get him the ball back, to put him in good position. The problem is going to be regulating the success. You know, is he going to have the one good game go to his head and think he's the best ever? Or is he going to take that good game for what it is and then learn from the bad games the way he should? Because he's going to have great games and he's going to have terrible performances. There's no doubt about it. Can he be harnessed and controlled by Mike Shanahan? I think it's something that's yet to be seen, but I definitely think he's got a lot of promise in Washington. Players that I'm unsold on. Number one, Tony Romo. You know, it's not just Tony Romo. It's the system. Again, when I talked about the Cowboys, I wasn't sold on DeMarco Murray. I don't know what's going on with Austin Miles. This is a guy that is, Miles Austin. I always say his name backwards. This is a guy that's always hurt. He's hurt again right now as I'm making this video. I personally think the Cowboys need to go out and get Plaxico Burress before somebody else does when they have a receiver go down. But Tony Romo isn't consistent enough to be somebody I would want on my fantasy team. And then as much as I hate to say it, I have to put Matt Schaub in that same bundle. I mean, Andre Johnson is a great wide receiver, but he does get nicked up from time to time, and we've seen that when that happens, his weapons kind of run out. You know, Owen Daniels hasn't had the best of seasons. He's also been hurt. Schaub himself is hurt. I don't know if I could trust him as much as I need to if he was going to be my number one sole quarterback and I didn't have a decent backup. And then finally, and I hate to say this, I'm kind of unsold on Peyton Manning. And don't get me wrong, I've seen the practices. I'm going to end up seeing a preseason game and wonder why I said this, I'm sure. I imagine Peyton Manning is a very smart man, and he wouldn't jeopardize his health to come back and play for anyone, much less the Denver Broncos. But I can't help but think that one magical hit, and don't get me wrong, any player can get hurt at any time for any reason at any position. But I just don't know if one player wouldn't hit Peyton hard just to say that they were the one that ended his career. And I know that sounds terrible, but I also know that if that were to happen, that player's name will never be forgotten. And that's something that bothers me, troubles with me, and would stick with me if I was going to take Peyton Manning as my quarterback this year. But I definitely think he will improve that offense immensely and make guys like Demetrius Thomas a household name.